Chapter 6. Economic Development and Socialism. The biggest success of the growing working class movement has been finding real support for making socialism come true based on the way capitalist society works. Because of this discovery, socialism stopped being a far-off dream and became something that had to happen in history. Bernstein says that today's society does not have the economic conditions for socialism. His ideas on this have changed over time. At first, in Neue Zeit, he simply argued that industry was not getting concentrated too quickly. He based his view on comparing job statistics in Germany from 1882 and 1895. Even when he showed that medium-sized businesses were still around, he did not weaken Marx's analysis, because Marx did not require a fixed rate of concentration or the complete disappearance of small capitals, what people call the loss of the petite bourgeoisie, for socialism to occur. Later, Bernstein presented a new set of proofs in his book using statistics about shareholding companies. He used these numbers to claim that the number of shareholders kept growing, so the capitalist class was not shrinking but getting larger. It is surprising that Bernstein did not know much about his own data, and it is even more surprising how poorly he used the available information to support his ideas. If Bernstein wanted to disprove Marx's law of industrial development by looking at shareholding companies, he should have used very different numbers. Anyone who knows the history of shareholding companies in Germany can see that their average starting capital has almost constantly become smaller. These are very surprising numbers. Bernstein hoped to show from them that there is a trend going against Marx's view, where large companies turn into small ones. The clear answer to his attempt is that if you want to prove something with statistics, you must first show that the data comes from the same parts of industry. You cannot prove that small companies really replace large ones if they only appear in industries that already had small or artisan businesses before. In fact, this cannot be shown. The movement from very large shareholding companies to medium-sized and small companies can only be explained by the fact that the system of shareholding companies is spreading into new areas of production. In the past, only a few large companies were organized as shareholding companies. Over time, shareholding organization has spread to include medium-sized and even small companies. Today, we can even see shareholding companies with a capital of less than 1,000 marks. What is the economic importance of more and more shareholding societies? In simple words, as shareholding societies spread, it shows that production under capitalism is becoming more social. This means that not only big companies, but also medium and small companies are sharing in production. So, the growth of shareholding does not go against Marx's theory. In fact, it strongly supports it. What does a shareholding society really mean economically? On one hand, it means that many small fortunes are combined to form one large sum of money for production. On the other hand, it means that the act of making things is separated from who actually owns the money. In other words, this change wins twice over the way production works in capitalism, even though it is still within a capitalist system. What do the numbers that Bernstein shows mean, the ones that say more and more shareholders are joining companies? They show that today a capitalist company is no longer owned by one single person. Instead, it is owned by many people. The idea of a capitalist is not about an isolated individual anymore. Today's industrial capitalist is more like a group made up of hundreds or even thousands of individuals. The term capitalist has itself become a social category. It has become socialized within the framework of capitalist society. So how can we explain Bernstein's belief that shareholding societies mean that capital is spread out rather than concentrated? Why does he see capitalist property as growing when Marx argued that it was being reduced? This is a simple economic mistake. For Bernstein, the term capitalist does not refer to how production works. It refers instead to the right to own property. To him, a capitalist is not an economic unit but a financial one. And capital is not a factor that helps make things, it is simply a certain amount of money. That is why, in his example of an English sewing thread trust, he does not see 12,300 people combining their money into one single capitalist unit. Instead, he sees 12,300 different capitalists. That is why, for Bernstein, even an engineer like Schulz, whose wife's dowry gave him a large number of shares from a stockholder named Mueller, is also called a capitalist. For Bernstein, it seems as if the entire world is filled with capitalists. Here again, the root of his economic error lies in his popularization of socialism. He does this by moving the idea of capitalism from the way production works to the way property is owned. By talking about simple individuals instead of talking about entrepreneurs, he shifts the discussion about socialism from the relationship between capital and labor to the relationship between the rich and the poor. In this way, we are led from Marx and Engels to the author of the Evangel of the Poor Fisherman. There is one difference, though. Weitling, with the sure instinct of the working class, saw the fight between the poor and the rich as the basic form of class struggle and wanted to use that struggle to help bring about socialism. Bernstein, on the other hand, believes that socialism will come when the poor become rich. In other words, he thinks socialism will happen when class differences are weakened, and this change will come from the small business class. It is true that Bernstein does not only use income statistics. He also shows numbers about companies from countries such as Germany, France, England, Switzerland, Austria, and the United States. But these numbers compare different countries at one time, not the same country at different times. Except in Germany, where he repeats an old comparison between 1895 and 1892, he does not compare how companies change over time in one country. Instead, he gives the absolute figures from different countries, such as England in 1891, France in 1894, and the United States in 1890. He then concludes, though it is true that large exploitation is already supreme in industry today, it nevertheless represents, including the enterprises dependent on large exploitation, even in a country as developed in Prussia, only half of the population occupied in production. This is also true in Germany, England, Belgium, and other countries. But what does he actually prove with these numbers? He does not prove that there is a certain trend in economic development. Instead, he only shows the exact balance of power between different types of businesses or, in other words, between different classes in our society. If someone wants to argue from this method that socialism cannot be achieved, they must base their argument on the idea that the outcome of social efforts depends on the number and strength of the forces in the struggle, in short, on the use of violence. In other words, Bernstein, who always shouts against Blankism, see Louis Blanqui, ends up making the same big mistake as the Blanquists. The Blanquists, who were a revolutionary socialist group, thought that the economic achievement of socialism was natural. They believed that a violent revolution, even by a small minority, could bring socialism. Bernstein, however, argues that because there is not a large enough socialist majority, the economic achievement of socialism is impossible. Social democracy does not expect to reach its goal through either the violent victory of a minority or the strength of a large majority. Instead, it believes that socialism will come because of economic necessity and because people come to understand that necessity, leading the working masses to overthrow capitalism. And this need for change shows itself most clearly in the chaos of capitalism. What is Bernstein's view on the big question of chaos in the capitalist economy? He only denies that huge, all-encompassing crises will happen. He does not deny smaller or national crises. In other words, he refuses to see most of the chaos in capitalism, he only sees a little of it. As Marx once compared it, he is like the foolish virgin who had a child, who was only very small. But the problem is, when it comes to economic chaos, whether it is a little or a lot, both are very harmful. If Bernstein only sees a little chaos, then the way the market works will soon make that little chaos grow until it leads to collapse. And if he hopes to slowly change that small amount of chaos into order while still keeping the system of buying and selling goods, he makes a big mistake. He believes that the way things are exchanged is separate from the way things are produced. We will not go into a long explanation of Bernstein's surprising confusion about the simplest ideas of political economy, but one point must be made clear right away. Bernstein says that Marx's law of surplus value is just a simple idea, an abstraction. In political economy, saying something like that is clearly an insult. But if surplus value is only a simple idea, only something made up in the mind, then any normal person, someone who has served in the military and pays taxes, would have the same right as Karl Marx to create his own version of value. In other words, just as Marx can ignore all the special qualities of goods until they become nothing more than amounts of simple human labor, so can the economists of the Bohm-Jevons school ignore all the qualities of goods except for how useful they are. That is, for Bernstein, both Marx's idea of social labor and Menger's idea of abstract utility are just pure ideas, nothing more than abstract thoughts. Bernstein completely forgets that Marx's abstraction is not something he invented. It is a discovery. It does not only exist in Marx's head, but is found in the market economy itself. It is not imaginary at all, but a real social fact, so real that it can be measured, cut, hammered, weighed, and even turned into money. The abstract human labor that Marx discovered is, when fully developed, nothing other than money. This is one of Marx's greatest discoveries, while all the rich political economists, from the first mercantilists to the last classicists, have kept the true nature of money as a mysterious puzzle. The idea of abstract utility from Bohm-Jevons is really just a clever idea made up by the mind. More precisely, it shows empty thinking, a personal absurdity that cannot be blamed on capitalism or any other society, but only on the ordinary bourgeois economy itself. Clinging to their own clever ideas, Bernstein, Bohm, Jevons, and all their like-minded friends can go on for 20 years or more trying to solve the mystery of money, yet they never reach a different conclusion than any cobbler would. Money is simply a useful thing. Bernstein has completely lost his grasp of Marx's law of value. Anyone with even a little knowledge of Marx's ideas knows that without this law, Marx's whole theory cannot be understood. In other words, if someone does not understand what a commodity is and how it is exchanged, then the entire capitalist economy, with all its connections, will always be a mystery. What was the key that allowed Marx to unlock the secrets of capitalist society and solve problems that even the greatest classic economists did not suspect? It was his view of capitalist economy as something that changes over time, not just looking at its feudal past, as classic economists did, but also at its socialist future. The secret of Marx's theory of value, his study of money, his theory of capital, his idea of profit, and his whole analysis of the economic system lies in the temporary nature of capitalist economy and the fact that its collapse is inevitable, leading to socialism. Only because Marx looked at capitalism from a socialist point of view, from a long-range historical perspective, was he able to understand the hidden messages in capitalist economy. And it is exactly because he started from a socialist viewpoint that he was able to give a solid, scientific base to the socialist movement. This is how we judge Bernstein's comments. He complains about the dualism found everywhere in Marx's great work, Capital. Bernstein says that Marx tries to be both a scientific study and to prove a theory that was fully developed long before the book was written. He even points back to the Communist Manifesto, the clear call for socialism, as proof that Marx's ideas still carry some traces of old, idealistic dreams. But what does Marx's dualism really mean if not the split between a socialist future and a capitalist present? It is the split between capitalism and labor, between the rich, the bourgeoisie, and the working class, the proletariat. It is a scientific way of showing the deep conflict inside capitalist society. By calling Marx's dualism a survival of utopianism, Bernstein is really admitting, in a naive way, that he denies the class conflicts within capitalism. He is confessing that, for him, socialism is nothing more than a remnant of old, idealistic thinking. Bernstein's idea of monism, or unity, is simply the unchanging unity of the capitalist system. The unity of a former socialist who has given up on his real goal and decided to see the permanent state of bourgeois society as the true aim of human progress. Bernstein does not see in the economic structure of capitalism the kind of development that leads to socialism. Yet, to keep his socialist program alive, at least on paper, he is forced to hide behind an ideal idea that is separate from all real economic changes. He has to change socialism from being a clear, historical stage in social development into an abstract principle. That is why his idea of the cooperative principle, the small hint of socialism that Bernstein tries to add to capitalist economy, appears as a compromise made not for the future of a socialist society, but for Bernstein's own past as a socialist.